Hello and welcome to Tech and Sports Podcast. Tech and Sports is a show about how technology is revolutionizing all the major sports as well as health and fitness. You can find this episode from your podcast service of choice. Hello everyone, I'm Paul Dunley-Bledwer, the editor of Tech and Sports, and with me today, as always, but not always, sometimes I'm away, Mandy Kovacs, aka the Carlton Kid. How are you, Mandy?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well. The big Radu, Alex Radu, who's about to embark on his U.S. Thanksgiving Day celebration.
I cannot wait.
Collectively, we are your third stringers. And I want to thank all the listeners out there right now because this is our 20th episode, guys. Woo. Hooray! Thank you all, and please keep listening. Alex, you want to say something about this?
Yeah, and I just want to remind everybody that we would really appreciate it if you could go to iTunes or Google Play or wherever you get your podcast service and leave us a review or a star rating. Your feedback always really helps, and it helps grow the show. And, that's it. Yeah.
Great. So we have another awesome lineup for you again today on the podcast with stories about 3D printing in NFL locker rooms, what the 5G revolution is going to do for sports, and our debate topic is, can technology save athletes from ongoing concussions? That and incredibly hard trivia. So sit back and don't panic because the third stringers are coming into the game. Okay, Mandy has our news headlines, but before we get into that, just want to say I made the accurate prediction of the CFL Grey Cup final, Toronto and Calgary. Everyone else was wrong, including our in-studio expert, Jeff Volpe. Hope you're doing well, Jeff. But Edmonton is not in the final.
They almost were.
Almost,
yeah.
But not quite. Anyways, Mandy?
All right, so first up we have some mobility news. Football fans will be happy to know that AT&T has announced that it plans to launch 5G connectivity in Minneapolis over the next couple months and have it ready in time for the Super Bowl in February. Most cellular data today operates on 4G or LTE speeds, but 5G will enable much faster speeds for things like videos, downloading, and live stream for people who have phones capable of taking advantage of it, like the new Samsung Galaxy S8 and 8 Plus. And similarly, the Korea Telecom Corporation has teamed up with Intel to launch 5G connectivity at the Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang in February as well. So Intel and KTC say that 5G will help power 360-degree virtual reality experiences for events like the opening torch relay and bobsledding. And fans will even be able to get a first-person perspective of a bobsled race with 5G cameras on the athletes' helmets. So if these 5G trial runs, as we call them, go well, we could definitely see more widespread 5G coverage in 2018, which is definitely good news for all the consumers out there with cell phones, which is everyone.
Yeah, so 5G, it's going to be lightning fast. Mm-hmm. It's going to be like night and day type of service. And I think it's ideal for sports, for people like us who enjoy watching sports. That example you showed you talked about the bobsledder. Mm-hmm. I mean, that would be like, I don't know, choppy, maybe not going at like actual speed. I think with 5G, you probably get a good sense of what these athletes are going through. So
I'm definitely going to take advantage of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially in like hockey, when you look at like ref cams and stuff like that, mm-hmm. that they would ideally like to implement. So that would be really cool if, just a better connection's always better, mm-hmm. That's really as easy as that. And hopefully our infrastructure in Canada and in the U.S. is able to actually take advantage of this soon. I doubt it, but
fingers crossed. I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm still using 3G, so this will be a real big step up.
Yes, but for sporting events, look at the Tour de France. 5G is going to make that sport even more popular. Anyways.
Right, moving on. Have you ever wanted to play basketball on LeBron's face? Well, if you want to move to the Philippines, you can now, because in partnership with Google, Nike has launched its Nike Hyper Courts in Manila, which are basically digitally enabled basketball courts. People can play on these courts, and with an app on their phones, they can unlock exclusive content and basketball training drills for free without using any data by connecting to the court's Wi-Fi thanks to Google technology. Nike calls it the first on-court digital experience, and the best part is each of the 5 courts has a giant mural of an NBA star on its floor. So there's LeBron James, there's Kobe Bryant, we have a Kyrie Irving court, a Kevin Durant court, and a Russell Westbrook court. And in each of these courts, you can unlock basketball drills skills from these specific players and learn how they play.
Kind of crazy. I actually saw some release stills of this, and the courts look like smartphones.
Yeah.
They illuminate.
They're
shaped like smartphones, and I know the court is like that as well. And I see the potential really impacting like average consumers who are sports fans. Imagine displaying, Carey Price on your garage and shooting pucks at it. That'd be fun as a Leaf fan, right?
I mean, first, it's really interesting that Kobe Bryant is there. It shows how his popularity transcended just the entire world, and that he's been retired and not good for years, and they still chose his face over arguably Steph Curry. or something like that. But second, what I really like is that this is just another really good example of fan engagement, because it kind of takes that idea that a lot of people like is, unlocking things and working towards a goal. So it could be, I really like this idea where it's like, okay, you have sensors on this court, or like the example, if you had like a NHL goalie on your garage door or something. Let's say you have to you have to shoot the puck or make a basket from this spot so many times, and then you unlock the next thing.
It's like a video game.
It's like a video game in that respect, and it really works. But you're actually practicing, and it increases your abilities and stuff like that. So I think that is an entirely new level of fan engagement that I think is going to just get kids more engaged too, because the sports games, whether it's FIFA, NBA. Not NHL because hockey's not popular around the world, but all of those
yet.
Sure. All those games are some of the best-selling video games in the world yearly, month after month. So this idea is, I think, going to be really cool.
Well, not to mention the societal impact too, right? Because the Philippines has a very large wage gap. Not a lot of people can afford data. So the fact that these courts now have free Wi-Fi to actually practice what they want, great news for some of the low-income families.
Yep.
All right. And then when it comes to getting close to athletes, nothing gets you closer like the Players Tribune, which is a website that posts personally written pieces from athletes themselves. Now the Players Tribune has launched a new 30-minute weekly show on Twitter called #Verified that lets star athletes answer questions from fans live by directly speaking to the camera. So it debuted this past Monday, November 20th, with Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver A.J. Green. And the next few episodes will be hosted by the Minnesota Timberwolves center Karl Anthony Towns, Atlanta Falcons wide receiver Mohamed Sanu, and Pittsburgh Steelers linebacker T.J. Watt. So the Tribune describes the show as a traditional post-game press conference with the twist of having the athletes speak directly to the camera and allowing fans to ask the questions about anything they want, from game performances to personal lives to current events.
Did they ask AJ Green why he's giving me so little fantasy points this year?
I'm not sure, but you could probably ask that question in this if you really wanted to.
Yeah, I can just I can see that happening for sure. Someone's going to say, "Hey, you really were bad this week. My fantasy cost me my league and everything like that." And AJ Green and all these players, they're professionals. I don't think they really want to handle these kind of idiotic questions from fans.
Oh, but it's totally not idiotic, because I was totally asked KAT. I'd be like, hey, so Porzingis, he's having a year. Why aren't you having a year?
And you can ask those questions because it's totally fan-driven, and I love that. It's also kind of cutting out the middleman reporter, which is not good for our jobs and for the future that I want with my career, but hey, it's fun for everyone else.
Exactly.
All right. Moving on, next we have more news from Nike, but this time the company is teaming up with HP to 3D print customized performance shoes for athletes and eventually for us working class folks. Paolo, I think you have more on this.
Yeah, I was in San Diego where I tracked this story down, and so recently Nike made custom track spikes for 3-time Olympic gold medalist Allison Felix of the USA using HP 3D printed technology. Now, if you look at these shoes, they scream speed and they look amazing. This, to me, is disrupting the industry. It's industry-wide disruption because the technology with Nike involved and using HP's multi-jet fusion 3D printing technology they're able to do something called rapid prototyping. This means forget about developing a cross-training shoe that could be sold to the masses and that's being developed over the years in the Nike lab and then brought into production, and who knows how long that takes. Now, Nike and HP together can make your shoe on the fly just for you, and that shoe could increase your performance or maybe make you more comfortable. Now, the track and field season is over, and so we don't have any results from Felix and her new shoe. At the last World Championship, she placed third and won the 4x100 relay race. So, I mean, she's a world-class athlete with or without the shoes. And that's a little teaser for our upcoming really hard trivia question, by the way.
We're not going to get it?
Yeah,
Right, cool.
You're not going to get it, no, but I like spring it on you. Anyways, HP has been really pushing the envelope with 3D printing in the last 3 years and to develop something called the selective laser sintering, or SLS, that has allowed manufacturers like Nike to make and tweak prototypes in hours instead of months. This process has been fast-tracked, and they're creating everything from the aforementioned track spikes to football cleats. And that's what I heard in San Diego, that there's 3D printers going inside NFL locker rooms. Now, Nike already made shoes for football players called the Nike Vapor Laser Talon and the Nike Vapor Hyper Agility that was used recently in the Combine. Nike, too, is also pushing HP to create 3D printers for even faster prototyping. So don't be surprised to see a situation where, let's say, there's a playoff game, let's say in Buffalo during the winter. Oh, wait, they probably won't make the playoffs. Let's go to Green Bay.
Burn.
Oh, wait, they're not making the playoffs either.
Wow.
Let's go to Philadelphia.
So much shade. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Let's go to Philadelphia because they're actually 9-1 and they play outdoors.
God, don't get a Vikings fan angry.
I know, seriously. You just
Sorry.
every other team?
I couldn't help myself. We play in a dome, so it doesn't really matter. Anyways, but if the weather turns in the second half, I can see teams creating shoes for players on the fly, or maybe even for the kicker to make that long kick at the end of the game. And while Nike is doing this, other shoemakers like Under Armour, Adidas, New Balance, and Reebok, they're in the game too. And don't be surprised if you see things like hockey skates and other sorts of equipment being custom made on the fly using 3D printing to gain a competitive edge.
Well, this reminds me of I wrote a story probably like half a year ago now about Adidas and their kind of their 3D printing shoes and all that. And what's really interesting about this and what I learned then was that with how they make shoes has been the same for basically the last like 30 to 50 years. And this is the first time that that particular part of the shoe industry is being revolutionized, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. It's going to have so many different applications in the manufacturing sector.
And, think about it. Even like custom orthotics, insoles, maybe the heel needs to be tweaked and not the rest of the shoe. This is what
maybe
what's
they
in
can
front
finally make women's heels more comfortable to wear. That would be great.
Well, there's something called a fit station that HP has developed, and they have it at retail. I don't know how widespread it is, but there's a couple of startups, Feetz, Feetz. I may be mispronouncing that. Another company that makes sandals, things like that. So it's going beyond sports as well.
Well, and the implications specifically in sports, you see, at least in basketball, so many like heel injuries.
Yeah, for sure.
And because basketball players are tall, so their feet are more likely to be just weirdly shaped. And it's tough. They need all NBA players have mostly custom shoes and stuff like that. So this is just even gonna help them even more, which is cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, next up, we have a couple products to showcase. Seoul Electronics has started an Indiegogo campaign to try to fund its wireless sport earphones that are designed with bright LED flashing lights to help keep runners safe. So if you like to run at night or live in a country like us that gets dark at 4 p.m. for half the year, these headphones might be for you. The light-enabled version costs $129 on Indiegogo, and it'll start shipping in March 2018. Although the company also has another non-lit version available for $99 starting in December.
I have a question. So you know how, like, when you're running in the dark on the street, you're supposed to be wearing, like, bright orange?
Or reflective
lights, just so, you don't die?
Yes.
Right. Could this basically do that same thing? Where the lights would basically then be like, oh, hey, look.
Yeah, they're just in your ears this time instead of on your body.
Yeah. I think it just adds on to the reflective garb that runners wear who train at night or run at night. I saw a couple of stills of this too, and we may actually get it in to review it. So look for that on itbusiness.ca/sports. But yeah, it's very, very highly reflective.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then continuing with the health and fitness topic, we've covered Fitbit and Samsung launching new smartwatches recently, and it looks like everyone, even a printer company, is getting in on the game. Epson has launched a line of 5 new fitness-oriented smartwatches called ProSense that come with GPS technology, activity tracking, heart rate sensors, music control, and notification capabilities, as well as a battery that can last up to 30 days in watch mode or up to 4 in activity tracking mode. So there's the ProSense 17, the 57, 307, 347, and the 367. And prices range from $129.99 US for the base 17 model, all the way up to $539.99 for the fanciest 367 model that comes with a sapphire glass screen. Because why not?
Sapphire glass is supposed to be stronger than Gorilla Glass, but that's also completely debatable.
I don't think that's been tested yet, has it?
And it's just, I think people haven't decided yet. It's also, I think it's more expensive though.
Yeah, well, considering the $340 for this watch, probably.
Yeah, what's interesting about this is that Epson's trying to get into like an already really complicated market. Mm-hmm. It's not a huge market. It's dominated by the top 3 brands. So Apple, Xiaomi, which is a Chinese manufacturer, and Fitbit, they control about 67, basically 2/3 of the market just by themselves. And then you add Huawei and Samsung, who are 4 and 5, into that, and that's like 75 to 80% of the market. So Epson's basically trying to get into that last 20% because they're not going to break it. They're not going to steal someone from Samsung. They're not going to steal someone from Huawei. They're not going to steal someone from Apple, Fitbit, or Xiaomi.
No.
So it's a really interesting risk that this is what they're going after.
Yeah, I don't quite get it.
Well, if you look at it, it's actually it's risky for sure, but they do have a sound strategy because we have done some stories on the ProSense, and I'm glad that they're coming out with like a version 2 of it because it sort of like was in a hiatus state, but Pebble's out of the market.
Yeah,
right.
Pebble was acquired by Fitbit.
Pebble's acquired by Fitbit.
The beginning of this year.
That's right. So Pebble's acquired by Fitbit. So anytime you have an acquisition, right? Most people, when they make acquisitions, they think, well, 1 + 1 will equal 2. But really, it never, ever works out that way. It's always 1 + 1. Hopefully, may equal 1.5. And you're lucky, maybe 1. Right. So that void in the market that Pebble had, and there was a lot of people that liked the Pebble device.
Right.
Maybe that's where they're targeting to. And if they do get that little small portion, it's a big win for Epson.
So, but Fitbit is taking that Pebble market and doing with it. Like it's just now Fitbit branded Pebble, basically.
Yeah, but the people that bought Pebble because they didn't want Fitbit, and they didn't want Samsung, and they didn't want these other brands.
But I'm not convinced that they're going to want Epson.
No, but that's the.
No one's heard
that's
of
the.
Epson.
Yeah. Well, no. First of all, Epson. People have heard of Epson.
Well, they have, but not in like no one's going like, oh, hey, I need that Epson branded smartwatch for my health and fitness.
Well, that's why that's why they came out with something unique with the Sapphire, right? So they're doing their due diligence, and
we'll see.
You can't count them out before they even got started. So let's see how it goes.
Okay, I'm not convinced yet, but I'm open to.
We'll keep you all updated. And lastly, a quick story here. The Oklahoma City Thunder are the first NBA team, and the Tampa Bay Lightning are the first NHL team to create digital fan engagement platforms that include a virtual assistant chatbot for fans. The chatbot will use natural language processing technology developed by Satisfy Labs to answer any questions fans might have about their respective teams, ticket options, real-time traffic, and directions via the navigation app Waze, plus parking options. The chatbot can also help fans find food and beverage locations, as well as merchandise offers at team stores, and can accurately respond to thousands of fans at a time. So for OKC, the chatbot can be used on the OKC website or official app, as well as on Facebook Messenger through the team's Facebook page, while the Lightning's platform, called Thunderbot, can be used on Tampa's official website, app, Facebook page, as well as its Arenas app, too.
So how come Siri and Cortana can't, or Alexa can't help you figure all this stuff out?
I don't know.
That they have to create their own bots.
Well, I mean, these are specific for the teams, though.
Yeah.
So they can answer more detailed
I get
questions.
that. I get that.
When is my team going to play next? Or,
I think it's more so just like it goes to improving just the fan app rather than this being the selling point for the app.
I would agree with that.
I think it's more so
I think
just like this is an addition to the app. Like we could be like, oh, this is feature number 5 or 6 on the Oklahoma City Thunder app or something like that. That's to me more so what it sounds like. Because like traffic, for instance, there are so many things rather than you would ask a chatbot for. But I mean, hey, if you're in the middle of a game and you're ordering, let's say, food or whatever in the fourth quarter because you're starving for some reason, and it's a slow game. I mean, and you have the app open, you could always just send a quick message to the chatbot, and I guess that's more so the implication of it.
Right, yeah. So there was an Australian soccer team that introduced a chatbot as well, and I don't know if this feature is available in the NHL or NBA ones, but you could actually message this chatbot and could tell you how long the wait is to get like food or beer or something.
Yeah.
So I don't know specifically if it's for these two teams, but I'm sure that will happen at some point. Yeah. That seems like an important feature.
Fan engagement is good.
Yeah, agreed.
I agree.
All right, that's it for the news today.
Alrighty. So before we get into our debate, let's go to incredibly hard trivia. And because we had a story about 3D printed shoes, I thought, why don't we take a look at shoes for our trivia question? But let me remind you all again, if you want to impact this show, please send in your trivia questions and we'll put them in the podcast or topics. Go to techinsports@itwc.ca and we'll definitely respond to you.
Yeah, so just email the podcast at techinsports@itwc.ca, and that is where we will get all of your questions or just trivia questions, topics, and then we'll talk about them on the show.
Exactly.
Yeah. Fan engagement, guys.
Okay, so guys, who is the only marathon runner to win back-to-back Olympic gold medals, the first without wearing shoes, and then 4 years later wearing Adidas running shoes?
Was this recent?
No, it was not.
Okay. Oh, I thought it was that guy from Britain.
It happened in the 1960 Olympics in Rome, and then in the 1964 Olympics in Tokyo.
All right. Well, hey, we'll answer that question after this debate topic, which is today we're going to expand on the news from last week about the concussion research released by the NFL. So we will talk about whether this is the right move by the NFL to focus on the helmet aspect of this problem, and then whether or not it can prevent CTE from ruining the NFL. Although I guess one could argue that the NFL is ruining the NFL, but I digress. Mandy, how about you recap us and tell us more about these stats?
Right, yeah. So the NFL's first research update of its engineering roadmap was released last week, and the NFL's engineering committee recommended that helmets be modified to be position-specific after reviewing every single concussion-inducing play from the past 2 seasons. And some of the really important stats from this, compared to previous studies, almost half of head-related impacts come from helmet to body, and particularly shoulder hits, while 36% come from helmet to ground instances, and 19% of head hits come from helmet to helmet impacts. And so the greatest percentage of concussions come from a player actually tackling an opponent as opposed to being tackled or blocking, for example. So that makes up 41% of all concussions. While being tackled causes about 22% of them, blocking causes 19%, while being blocked causes 11% of concussions. And so among position groups, cornerbacks sustain the most concussions at about 22% of the overall concussions over the last 2 years, followed by wide receivers at 15%, Then linebackers and offensive linemen tied at 11%. And what's interesting, though, is that 40% of quarterback concussions resulted from blows in which the upper rear section of the helmet collides with the ground. So that's typically when a quarterback is sacked or otherwise hit. So the committee is recommending that perhaps quarterback helmets, for example, can be reinforced more in the back upper area of the helmet. So, I mean, all of these stats are really interesting. And I mean, besides them telling us that football is inherently a very violent sport, I think that position-specific helmets are a great idea. And we need to start looking into technology that can do that.
I'm literally shocked. And we talk on this podcast lots of times about the data that we get and looking at the data and passing the eye test. The eye test would tell me that, linemen, so defensive linemen and offensive linemen would be more prone to concussions because they're battling in the trenches all the time, while a cornerback is just running down the sidelines and, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 times he's being targeted by a throw. Of course, he has to come up and make tackles on running backs who are sweeping. So there could be concussions that way, but I just find the data really, really interesting.
I think it kind of does prove that there is kind of this interesting way of this almost stereotype that linebackers, offensive linemen, they're the ones who are kind of doing more damage to themselves. But I think their injuries, when you really look at it, they seem to be more like bodily injuries of twisted ankle, because they're more grappling with each other. Well, like if you're sacking a quarterback, you're laying him out.
That's right.
So if you're trying to tackle the dude with the ball, you're trying to really bring him down, while linemen are kind of just grappling with each other.
They're trying to hold each other back as opposed to actually like completely knock them out.
That's right, because the O lineman cannot tackle a defensive lineman to the ground. That would be holding. But every other player would have to try and tackle and bring them to the ground. So yeah, that does make sense.
So I mean, will this help prevent concussions if we move this direction? I mean, really, for football or for any sport.
I have to agree, and there is some work being developed with a Seattle company called Vices that's made some progress with their 0-1 helmet. Alex Smith, the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, is wearing it this year. There was a recently published study by Dr. Ann McKee, where she tested 111 brains from National Football League players, and the news came out of Minnesota recently that one of their great linebackers, Fred McNeil, who passed away a few years ago, so he had CTE, but his testing was done when he was alive. So the way the story is. That's right. So that was under non-disclosure, and it just came out just recently. But some of the things that was laid out in her report is that CTE systematically kills brain cells via a protein called Tau, T-A-U. And if you look at the Fred McNeil story, you would think, oh, this guy had a great college football career. He's in the College Football Hall of Fame. He played 12 years with the Vikings. He retired. He studied law. He graduated. He got a great job as a lawyer. And then 8 years after that, he started losing his faculties, basically, and he had to stop practicing law. And this is what this study was showing. So, anyways, so you're saying can it destroy the NFL? Well, according to this study, 99% of the brains she tested, that's 110 out of 11, showed signs of CTE. So yes, it can. Now, can Vices, with their technology, maybe prevent that? I'm not sure. They have neurosurgeons, concussion specialists, and former NFL team physicians on their staff. Yeah, Alex, what were you going to say?
Yeah, the whole point of will technology help prevent CTE, I think is huge. It's very important, and I think it's good. The problem is that it's almost like too little, too late, because it's like you look here and you see this number of 110 out of 111. The technology to prevent all that hasn't existed yet. So you can then assume that in the current day of NFL, that number is probably similar.
That's because the helmet technology has not at all developed or since the war.
Well, exactly. So, like, the helmet technology...
So every single...
Or maybe since the 70s. I shouldn't say since the war. But anyways, it's a long time.
Yeah, so the helmet... any of this technology is not even implemented yet.
Yeah.
So, by the time it is, you're going to just have more football players dying, more of it coming out, more lawsuits, more this, more that, more that.
I hope that Vices can get data from Alex Smith's helmet at the end of the season. Obviously, that's not going to be released during the season because there are sensing technologies inside the helmet.
Well, this is basically saying that this entire generation of NFL players are screwed. Like every single one of them are going to have CTE when they're older, when they die, it's going to be proven. So, I mean, this helmet technology, we can say that it's going to help NFL players, but I mean, it's really not. At the end of the day, it's just going to save them from potentially more concussions. What it's really going to do is it's going to save younger kids getting into football right now.
And I think that's important.
Even honestly in 10 years.
Yeah.
Because this technology's not going to be widespread for the next 5 years.
Right, yeah, we haven't even developed a good helmet technology that can actually help these people. You know, these are just recommendations. And there's been a couple technologies that we've talked about previously, like having the helmet encased in like another helmet so that the inner part actually moves and absorbs blows as opposed to just blocking it stationary. Yeah. If that makes sense. So,
and then the outer part basically breaks away like a car bumper. We've talked about
exactly.
that. Yeah,
so and that's great.
And I've brought up the whole collar thing.
Right.
The Q collar that is still being tossed around, in which it would actually kind of prevent certain blood flow that could make head injuries easier and stuff like that. But you almost have to wonder, is it too much damage? Is it too soon? Too much work too late? Because right now you have to think of our generation who's super aware of what's happening in the NFL.
We're woke.
Would you let your kid, I wouldn't let my kids play football because even if the technology's there, the culture is still all screwed up. And until any of that changes, it's like, why would you choose to play football when most of these athletes can play another sport?
Well, as a person who played high school football, but I have daughters, so obviously that's not happening. But if I had a son, I would definitely encourage him to play football. I think it's a great sport beyond the risk that you incur. And I think any NFL player or CFL player or college player knows the risks, and they still choose to pursue this sport.
See, I digress. I think that now that more of this is coming out, less people want to play it, less parents want their kids to play it. I mean, I've stopped watching the NFL altogether, partially because of this, partially because of the societal aspects of it and all, the rapists, murderers, sexual assaulters on all of these NFL teams.
None of which play for the Minnesota Vikings, but then we'll go on.
Okay, well, there we go.
You're a star running back a couple years ago, dude.
Yes, he was overly parenting.
Anyways,
let's digress there from that.
Maybe we'll end there.
Well, it's the kind of to put the cherry or put the bow on top of this conversation. It's awesome that this technology is coming and it's happening. People are talking about it, but you do have to wonder with it: is it too little, too late?
I don't think it's too little, too late. I just want just one data point about the Vices helmet. So what you were saying earlier, Mandy, they're trying to address the issues with. In their technology, having dozens of columns inserted in what they call a reflex layer, which is a second part of the helmet right below the hard outside layer. And during an impact, these columns bend, compress, and move, help absorb as much of the incoming force, whether it's direct linear collision or the kind of blow that typically is associated with rotational forces, responding to hopefully concussions there. They also have a smash lab, which is like a torture chamber for helmets. And, they're trying to solve a problem. And this is a serious problem that's in there. So we have to give them, there's progress at least. Exactly. Okay. Should we get to the very incredibly hard trivia question?
Yeah, let's do this.
Before we get into it, again, let's give it back to the audience. Thank you again for 20 episodes. You can impact the show by sending us your very hard trivia questions or easy trivia questions, I'm sure Alex and Mandy would appreciate that, or any other topics, techinsports@itwc.ca. So, you guys have any guesses, or do you want a clue?
Bruce Jenner.
Bruce Jenner was a decathlete.
It's the only name I know from back then.
Also, I don't think he was the 60s.
No, definitely wasn't.
1976 Montreal Olympics.
No, I've got nothing. I couldn't tell you a runner that is current today. So
Usain Bolt, you couldn't name that?
He retired, didn't he?
Yeah, he keeps saying that, but then he keeps running races.
He's a sprinter, not a marathoner.
Oh yeah.
He's from Ethiopia.
I mean, again,
now wouldn't that make sense that an Ethiopian back in the 60s might not have shoes to run?
Sure.
I guess. Yeah.
Anyways, Bibi Bikila.
Cool.
That name actually sounds familiar.
He's a historical figure.
BB.
Please send us easier ones. Thank you.
Yeah, please. We actually want to get one of these at some point.
Once again, it's email us at techinsports@itwc.ca for your easier trivia questions. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to have more on the story about 3D printing in the NFL on itbusiness.ca/sports. So please tune in for more great Tech and Sports content there. You can find me at Paulo CDN on Twitter. Alex
T. Radu.
And I'm at Mandy V. Kovacs.
Okay, thanks a lot for joining us. That's it for the Tech and Sports Podcast. I'm Paulo Donibletto.
Bye.